evening, everyone, and welcome to this session on tooling up to tackle carbon. What are we learning about soil carbon sequestration? My name is Becky Wilson, and I'm project manager here at the Farm Carbon Toolkit, a farmer-led organisation based here in the UK, aimed at providing practical tools and resources to help farmers reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve energy and business resilience, and build soil health. Thank you to the organising committee here at ORFC for allowing us to host this session this evening. Not only are we incredibly lucky to be part of this phenomenal event and throw open the doors of our industry to around the world, but we're also going to hear from some fantastic speakers this evening on the subject of soil carbon sequestration. Tonight, we're going to hear three different speakers who have a diverse set of experiences around soil carbon sequestration. And we can learn more about their work and efforts and how they're helping to develop ways to support farmers who are managing their soils in a way which supports resilient, restorative farming systems that are fit for the future. So I thought I'd start this session with my favourite soil quote of all time, which was said by Paul Harvey, which just highlights the fundamental and critical importance of soil, not just for us as farmers, but for wider society. This is probably not a new concept for many of you who are listening. However, how we recognise, promote and support sustainable soils management has been a subject of much focus and debate over the last couple of years. The rise of regenerative agriculture, the increasing adoption by farmers of practices which support improved soil health, as well as improved ecosystem function, is well documented. This is leading to a need to provide tangible evidence that these changes are having the desired effect. This is where soil carbon measurement comes in. By being able to show change, we can then start to communicate in a much more positive way about the potential for agriculture as a climate solution. So apart from myself, we have three speakers this evening who have been doing brilliant work in this area and are going to share their experiences with us. After my talk, we're going to hear from Professor Jenny Dungate, who is a globally renowned soil scientist with fantastic academic credentials. However, she's also spent the last decade or so out on farm working with farmers, both in a research capability and also more latterly to help provide advice and guidance on improving soil carbon and ecosystem function. Jenny is going to be talking to us about the work that she's been doing with farmers in the Tamar Valley and some of the great results. Louisa is then going to talk to us, who's a director of Carbon Farmers of Australia, and she's been working in this space since 2006. I first came across Louisa when I travelled to Australia in 2006 for my Nuffield Scholar. Some of the farmers that were engaged in the first stages of measuring carbon baselines, ready for entering into soil carbon trading schemes. Louisa will bring her wealth of experience and explain to us how the carbon market is working for farmers in Australia and give us some insight into a programme that's well developed and underway. Finally, Tim Mead is the chairman of Yo Valley Organic. He will give us some of his valuable insights into the role of supply chains in helping support farmers, and how we might be able to communicate soil and some of its complexities to our consumers. I'm so grateful to all of them for giving up their time to share their experiences. Each of our speakers will speak for about 10 minutes, and then there'll be time at the end of all of the presentations for questions. So please do enter any questions. So why are we interested in soil carbon sequestration at Farm Carbon Toolkit? Well, we've been working on soil health and soil carbon sequestration for about the last 8 years. Starting off with running farmer workshops, and then over the last 3 years where we've been involved in a really exciting partnership project here in the UK, where we've been measuring soil carbon and soil health across a large number of farms. It's fair to say that interest in this topic has been rising, which is evident by the large number of people that we have in the session this evening. It's indisputable. Soil carbon has got to form part of wider carbon management discussions on the farm. Not only do we have brilliant opportunities to enhance soil carbon sequestration through how we manage our soils, crops and livestock, but we're also responsible for then ensuring that we protect that carbon that we're already storing in our soils and also reducing emissions from our wider farming operations. However, there are ongoing discussions about the capability, capacity and calculation of soil carbon. How do we include it in carbon footprint assessments from the farm? How permanent is it? What's our ability to just continue to sequester carbon forever? These are all questions which need answers, and we need to be able to show what's actually going on farm. When we start working at farm level, there are discussions about the mechanisms by which we document the change. Do we have to measure every field or every zone within a field or every farm? Or can we rely on scientific models to predict what a management change will do to soil carbon? Or can we combine the two? But what is fundamental to us at Farm Carbon Toolkit is that it needs to be included in farm carbon calculations. Just because it's complicated and difficult doesn't mean that we shouldn't start somewhere. And this is what we've been doing with our soil carbon project. And we're incredibly lucky to be part of a fantastic consortium working on this, where we've had some fantastic funding from Agritech Cornwall and worked with colleagues at Duchy College, Rothamsted Research and business partners to really start to understand this. And our soil carbon project is really trying to identify the answers to three key questions. The first question is about how do we test for soil carbon? And this is a massive question, and it really links into three different bits. It links into what are the analytical methods that we use? How many soil samples do we need to take? How deep do we need to take the samples? Is there a better time of year that we need to take them? But also, as well as that, then looking at what the differences are between different lab tests, looking at how many samples and how in-field variation changes. And also then looking at whether we can use any proxy indicators. So some of the things that we can all do if we just go out tooled up with a spade. Can we start to link any of the observations that we can make through digging holes with actually what's happening in terms of our carbon levels? So really trying to understand in more detail that sort of methodology and approach. Then once we've sorted that out, really then the interesting bit, what are those management practices that make a difference? And how can we then start to support farmers or incentivize farmers to start to take up those practices? And then the final part, which is often forgotten about, how does soil carbon sequestration really fit in to that whole farm carbon options? How do we start to look at what the opportunities are for soil carbon to offset other emissions that are happening on the farm? Our farmer collaborators are an incredibly important part of this process. We're very, very lucky that we're working with just under 100 farmers. You'll see from the map there that we have a high concentration of them in the southwest, and that's due to where some of our funding is coming from. But we do have a range that are also dotted around the rest of England. And what we've tried to do is have a complete range of farm types, soil types, and management systems, so we can really start to understand what's happening. I also like to point out this is a real partnership project. We don't start, or we're still at the point where we don't know all the answers. And it's been a real partnership to understand what we think might happen and then taking that out onto farm and seeing what happens in reality. It's a really fun experience. So what are we testing? Well, we're testing soil organic matter at 3 different depths. So what's going on 0 to 10 centimetres, 10 to 30 centimetres and 30 to 15 centimetres. We're GPS logging our points that we're going across the field. So then when we revisit in years 2, 3, 4, we can actually revisit those points again. And we're testing soil organic carbon. That's the sort of base level of testing that's going on across all of the fields involved in the project. We're also then looking at some of the new opportunities and the new tests that are available. Is there an importance in terms of carbon to clay ratio, carbon to nitrogen ratios, total organic carbon? How does carbon vary across the field? And what's the difference in terms of lab tests? What's also really important is that we're looking at bulk density, so that we're actually starting to be able to look at that carbon stock that's there in the field to start with, and then what we're doing in terms of improving it. And then, as I said, we're also looking at 3 proxy points where we're evaluating soil structure, worm activity, infiltration, aggregate stability, and biological activity. Our project is not finished yet. We're 3 years in, and we're very lucky that actually we're able to continue with some of our farms for another 5 years. So we're really going to get a really good data set. But what we found so far is that we can measure soil carbon, which is fantastic. Farmers can build soil carbon, and farmers are doing so. We have farmers within the project that are managing to sequester extra carbon through changing their management practice. And that management is so important. But what's also really important is to consider the whole farm footprint and look at the practices that will be those win-wins in terms of reducing emissions and improving carbon sequestration. And I suppose, what are the outputs of this project? Well, in the not too distant future, we will be publishing a best practice manual. So for anybody that's interested in taking soil samples for analysis for carbon, it will give you a step-by-step guide as to how to do it. And that will take in all the data that we found in terms of what the best time of year is to take samples, how many samples to take, through to looking at different lab tests that are available for you, what actually happens when you send a soil sample off to the lab, and all that information about best practice about how to take a soil sample for carbon will all be published. What we've also found is that these farm sites that we've got lots and lots of information on, they're brilliant to start to calibrate new tech solutions. So we've been doing some work looking at some of the available soil scanners that are out there. We've dug so many holes on these fields. We actually know so much what's going on. It's a really good backdrop to start to look at some of the new technological solutions. We'll be bringing out case studies, working and highlighting those stories of the farmers that have done these things. We're also really importantly going to integrate the soil carbon project results into the farm carbon calculator. So for those people that don't have 2 years worth of soil organic matter results, they'll be able to develop a practice-based approach so they can start to put in the practices that they're doing, and it will give you an idea of what your soil carbon sequestration is. And what we're hopefully also doing is developing that evidence-based that can be used to demonstrate impact and build confidence. Thank you very much. I say, if you'd like any more information, then please do visit our website. And I'd like now at this point to hand over to Jenny Dungate, who's going to talk to us about the work that she's been doing.
Thanks, Becky. Hi, everybody. Right, I'm going to start my talk now and hope it works. Right, so what I thought I'd do is to dig down a little bit more into the science underpinning what we are seeing on these farms, to show you some results from the Tamar Valley and also from South Cotswolds, and then rewarded for sequestering carbon, which is what Louise is going to talk about next. So thanks very much to Becky for inviting me to talk about carbon sequestration in farm soils. And I thought I'd start with the question, why should we sequester carbon? So probably the most important reason that we should sequester carbon in farm soils is to slow down climate change. Increasing soil carbon in farm soils is one of the few ways that we currently know can reduce carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. This makes carbon management a negative emissions technology. We have to pull down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere back into the soil to give time for green technologies to be developed. The second reason is, especially for farmers, is the beneficial effect that building soil carbon has for improving soil functions. This slide shows a range of ways that soil quality is improved by increasing soil carbon and thereby improving and increasing farm productivity. The relationship between soil carbon and soil biology is something that we have come to appreciate greatly, and I'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. The third reason is the prospect of direct payment for carbon credits, which Louise is going to talk about in Australia next. But this graph gives an indication of the value of carbon as carbon dioxide, tons of carbon dioxide, for carbon traded, projected until 2030 for the UK government, and this chimes in quite closely with other schemes around the world. We know that there are lots of people developing products to measure, buy and trade carbon stocks on farms based on different blends of measurement and modelling. So I suppose that the next question has to be, how much carbon can be stored in soils? A while ago, I saw a presentation. I can't remember the name of the person that gave the presentation. I wish I could. But they illustrated the carbon in soil like water in a bath. And I hope you'll agree that this is a really useful analogy. Thinking of soil carbon like this emphasises the fact that soil carbon is not permanent, as carbon sequestration or the term suggests. And in fact, it's always moving in and out of the soil as part of the natural carbon cycle. In fact, farmers have a large amount of control.
Jenny?
Yes?
Excuse me, we had a technical problem with the embed code going to the ORFC website. And so I hate to interrupt and cut you off, but we are going to start over from the very beginning.
Oh, okay.
Of the talk. So you'll get another chance to say it all over.
Okay. I'll come out of this then.
Becky, over to you.
Happy days. So what are we doing now?
Start over from the very beginning of your talk.
So from as in where we started at the very beginning again?
That's right.
So will it be the same process in terms of going through the thingy?
No, we're just going to start right now.
Okay, cool.
I'll put up your screen share.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
Super. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session on Tooling Up to Tackle Carbon. What are we learning about soil carbon sequestration? My name is Becky Wilson, and I'm Project Manager here at the Farm Carbon Toolkit, a farmer-led organisation based here in the UK, aimed at providing practical tools and resources to help farmers reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve energy and business resilience, and build soil health. Thank you to the organising committee here at ORFC for allowing us to host this session this evening. Not only are we incredibly lucky to be part of this phenomenal event and throw open the doors to our industry from around the world, but we're also going to hear from some fantastic speakers this evening on the subject of soil carbon sequestration. Tonight, we're going to hear 3 different speakers who have a diverse set of experiences around soil carbon sequestration. And we can learn more about how their work and efforts are helping to develop ways to support farmers who are managing their soils in a way which supports resilient, restorative farming systems that are fit for the future. I thought I'd start this session with my favourite soil quote of all time, which was said by Paul Harvey, which just highlights the fundamental and critical importance of soil, not just for us as farmers, but for wider society. This is probably not a new concept for many of you who are listening. However, how we recognise, promote and support sustainable soils management has been a subject of much focus and debate over the last couple of years. The rise of regenerative agriculture, the increasing adoption by farmers of practices which support improved soil health, as well as improved ecosystem function, is well documented. This is leading to the need to provide tangible evidence that these changes are having the desired effect. This is where soil carbon measurement comes in. By being able to show change, we can then start to communicate in a much more positive way about the potential for agriculture as a climate solution. So after my talk first, we're going to have 3 speakers this evening who have all been doing fantastic work in this area and are going to share their experiences with us. Firstly, we have Professor Jenny Dungate, who is a globally renowned soil scientist and has fantastic academic credentials. However, she has also spent the last decade or so out on farm with farmers, both in a research capacity and also more latterly working to help provide advice and guidance on improving soil carbon and ecosystem function. Jenny is going to be talking to us about some of the science and the work that she's been doing in the Tamar Valley. Louisa is a director of Carbon Farmers of Australia and has been working in the space since 2006. I first came across Louisa when I was travelling in Australia in 2016 for my Nuffield scholarship, where I met some of the farmers that were engaged in the first stages of measuring their carbon baselines, ready for entering into soil carbon trading schemes. Louisa will bring her wealth of experience and explain to us how carbon markets are working for farmers in Australia and give us some insight into a programme that's well documented and underway. Finally, Tim Mead is the chairman of Yo Valley Organic. He will give us some of his valuable insights into the role of supply chains in helping support farmers and how we might be able to communicate soil and its complexities to the end consumer. I'm so grateful to them for giving up their time to share their experiences. Each of our speakers will speak for about 10 minutes, and then there'll be time at the end for questions. So please do think about anything you might like to ask our speakers, and we'll get to those at the end. So why are we interested in soil carbon sequestration at Farm Carbon Toolkit? Well, we've been working on soil health and soil carbon sequestration for about the last 8 years, starting off with running farmer workshops. Over the last 3 years, we've been involved in a really exciting partnership project here in the UK, where we've been measuring soil carbon and soil health across a large number of farms. It's fair to say that interest in this topic has been rising, which is evident by the large number of people that we have attending this session tonight. It's indisputable. Soil carbon has to form part of the wider carbon management discussion on farm. Not only do we have a great opportunity to enhance soil carbon sequestration through how we manage our soils, crops and livestock, but we're also responsible for then ensuring that we protect the carbon that we're already storing in our soils and reducing emissions from our wider farming operations. However, there's ongoing discussions about the capability, capacity and calculation of soil carbon. How do we include it in carbon footprint assessments? How permanent is it? Do we have an ability to just continue sequestering forever? These are all questions which need answers, and we need to be able to show what's actually going on farm. When we start working at farm level, we then have discussions about the mechanisms by which we document the change. Do we have to measure every field or every zone within a field on every farm? Or can we look at a model-based approach to predict what a management change will do to soil carbon levels? Or can we combine the two? But what's fundamental to us at Farm Carbon Toolkit is that it needs to be included in farm carbon calculations. Just because it's complicated and difficult doesn't mean that we shouldn't start somewhere. And this is what we've been doing with our soil carbon project. And our soil carbon project is a partnership project, and we're very grateful for the funding that we've received through Aggregates Cornwall. And it's a partnership between Duchy College Rural Business School, Rothamsted Research Northwick, Farm Carbon Toolkit, and a range of other businesses. And our soil carbon project has three main aims. It's been running for the last 3 years. And what we're really trying to do is understand in more detail, how do we test for soil organic carbon? Is it soil organic matter? Is it soil organic carbon? Is it something else? Does it matter how deep we take the samples? How frequently we take the samples? How many samples do we need to take? Can we actually start to link some of those more proxy soil indicators to soil carbon levels? So really trying to understand and crystallize the whole measurement part of it has been the first aim of the project. The second aim of the project is then start to understand, well, now we know how to test for it. What is the impact of different management practices? How can we start to look at some of those practices that we might want to support in the future because they're building soil health and carbon? And then the final really important part of it is then starting to be able to understand the link between the opportunity to sequester carbon on farm and also how that might link to reducing emissions, and starting to look at what the potential is for carbon negative or carbon positive, depending on which way you want to communicate it, farms. Our farmer collaborators are a fantastic and superly vital part of the project. We wouldn't be able to do the project without them, and we're incredibly lucky that we have just under 100 farms that are engaged in the project. You'll see we've got a real cluster of them down in the southwest of England, in Devon and Cornwall, due to some of our funding that we managed to get down there with the Aggregates Cornwall project. But what we've tried to do is have a range of farming systems, soil types and management systems, so we can really understand what the potential is across a wide range of systems. What's also really important is it is a genuine partnership project where farmer knowledge and understanding about what's happened on those fields, historic management, and even things like where old field boundaries used to be, plays an incredibly important role with what we then do in terms of where we put our samples. So what are we testing? Well, we're testing soil organic matter and soil organic carbon at 3 depths. So we can really start to understand whether we're getting that transition of carbon further down the soil profile. So we're testing at 0 to 10, 10 to 30 and 30 to 50 centimetres. We're testing at GPS log points across the field. So then when we revisit in years 2, 3, 4, we can actually make sure we're revisiting those same points in the field. That's what we're doing as our sort of base across all farms. We're also then on some of our farms looking at some of the new or the sort of new advancing ways that we might be able to start testing of these sort of things. So we're looking at carbon to clay ratios, carbon to nitrogen ratios, we're looking at total organic carbon, we're looking at in-field variation, or our partners at Northwick Research are looking at the importance of in-field variation. And we're also looking at some work looking at the difference with the different laboratory analytical methods. What's also really important is that we take account of the current carbon stock that's in the field. So we need to do bulk density analysis to understand how much carbon is currently held on the field to make sure that we don't lose that. And we're also looking at some of those visual assessments. So we're looking at those things that actually you can walk out across your field with a spade and really start to look at what's going on in terms of looking at structure, worm counts and behaviour, infiltration, aggregate stability, to see whether we can link any of those measures that we can all do with some of the more laboratory analysis. So our project is not finished yet, but some of the sort of headlines: we can measure soil carbon, we are doing it, and we can do it. And what we've started to find through our fantastic cohort of farmers is that farmers can build soil carbon. So this is brilliant. How those fields are managed has an impact. So we do have the tools at our disposal in terms of how we manage our fields and how we manage our rotations and our livestock and our soils to be able to really have an impact on that. But it's so important to consider the whole farm footprint and really look to start to try with those practices that both reduce emissions and improve carbon sequestration. So just to finish off then, what are those out of the project? Well, in the next few months, we're going to be releasing a best practice manual. So if you're interested in taking soil samples to measure carbon, it will have loads of hints and tips about how to do it. And this will really start to include all that information about what the lab does with the samples when you send them off to the lab, how they like them to be prepared, how many samples should you take in a field, what time of year is the best time to take the samples, how deep should you take them, all those sort of things will be answered in our best practice manual. What we've also found is these sites that we've got are fantastic to be able to then start to see whether any of these new technological solutions are a useful tool to stop us having to dig so many holes. So we've got some fields that we know very, very intimately, and we've dug hundreds of soil pits in. And these are fantastic sort of sites to then start to try new scanning technology, the use of LiDAR data and other bits and pieces to see whether we can use these solutions to start to help the process. We'll be releasing a load of case studies in terms of some of our farmers that we've been working with and some of the brilliant steps that they've been doing. Another really important one is integrating those soil carbon project results into the farm carbon calculator so that you can then start to understand on a practice-based approach what the opportunities are. And then also, finally, just to develop that evidence base, which can be really used to demonstrate our impact and build confidence within our farming community. And if anybody would like any more information, the website is there. So I'm going to be quiet at that point, and I'm now going to hand over to Jenny, who's going to tell us about the work that she's been doing and explain some of the science.
Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a nice evening in the Northern Hemisphere, at least. So I'm going to talk to you, first of all, about some of the science underpinning the carbon sequestration that we see that we can or may want to do on farm. And then I'm going to talk to you about the case study that we did in the Tamar Valley and also with some farmers in the South Cotswolds. And then we'll think about why we value carbon and how we'd value it. And that will lead into Louise's talk about an actual scheme that's working in Australia. So I'd like to start, of course, by thanking Becky for the invitation to talk about carbon sequestration in farm soils. And perhaps it'd be a good place to start by asking, why should we sequester carbon in the first place? So perhaps the most important reason we want to sequester carbon in farm soils is to slow down climate change. Increasing soil carbon in farm soils is one of the few ways that we currently know can reduce carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. This makes soil carbon management a negative emissions technology. We have to pull down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere back into the soil to give time for green technologies to be developed. The second reason, especially for farmers, is the beneficial effect that building soil carbon has for improving soil functions. And this slide shows a range of ways that soil quality is improved by increasing soil carbon, thereby increasing farm productivity. The relationship between soil carbon and soil biology is something that we've come to appreciate greatly, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The third reason is the prospect of direct payments for carbon credits. This graph gives an indication of the value of carbon as in terms of carbon dioxide for carbon trading projected until 2030 by the UK government. And if you look at other costings around the world, this seems to sort of fit the same sort of value range. We know that there are lots of people developing products to measure, buy and trade stocks of carbon that's being sequestered in farm soils. And this is based on a blend of different measurements and modelling. So the next practical question, I think, is how much carbon can be stored in soils? A while ago, I saw a presentation that illustrated the carbon in soil like water in a bath. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who gave the presentation. I wish I could, but it was great. And I hope that you'll agree this is a really useful analogy. If you think of soil carbon like this, it emphasises the fact that soil carbon is not permanent, as the term soil sequestration of carbon implies. Is actually always moving in and out and through the soil as part of the natural carbon cycle. In fact, farmers have a large amount of control over the input of carbon, or how fast the bath fills, and the size of the output, or how big the plug hole is. However, it is true that there is a limit to how much carbon can be increased in soils. However, on a global scale, the opportunity to replace the soil carbon lost since agriculture began 12,000 years ago is huge. This graph shows the relationship between the land use for agriculture and the loss of soil carbon since humans started farming. This very large carbon debt gives us the opportunity to return carbon to the soil and to regenerate the soils that have been degraded whilst sequestering carbon, and make improvements to the rate of climate change, but also to the soils that we use to grow food. How quickly carbon increases in soil depends on where you are on the graph on the left, which shows the soil carbon content against time. Let's say that the initial equilibrium, which is that brown line on the left at the bottom, is a conventionally managed arable field with a poor soil carbon stock. When management changes so that carbon increases by changing to conservation tillage, for example, carbon starts to move up the slope. So you get more carbon in the soil until it reaches a new balance. So getting to the case study that I've worked on with the fabulous farmers in the Tamar Valley, and also farms in the South Cotswolds through the RAU, and also the pasture farming, I can't remember the pasture for life, sorry. Farmers in those groups allowed us to come on farm and to test the soils on their farm for the amount of carbon that was there, okay? So the graph on the right shows how we recently measured carbon in soil under different management in 2 regions in the southwest of the UK. And we calculated it actually takes about 30 years to reach sort of a maximum soil carbon content. Like many other studies, we also found that the way that soil is managed controlled the amount of carbon in the soil. And the different management types were arable, lay arable rotation, permanent grassland, and woodland. And you can see them on this graph here. The graph at the top shows that the soils under perennial crops had larger carbon stocks. And the graph at the bottom shows you how the soils from those same sample plots behaved when we put them into cold water. So importantly, we also found that the soil aggregates were more stable in cold water in soils under perennial crops. And the pictures on the left, actually it's to your right, show what happened if aggregates from an arable field with poor soil carbon content were put into water, that's at the bottom, or permanent grassland soils with a larger carbon content, that's the photo on the top. And you can see that the arable soil with a poor soil content collapsed, and this is the same soil type. So soil carbon controlled the stability of the aggregates in the water. This is really important in UK farm soils as we experience more rainfall because of climate change. And this slide shows why a well-structured soil with stable aggregates in water, and that is not compacted, is so important for getting rainfall moving through and out of farmland soils. The sort of cartoon in the photo on the furthest left shows the round, marbly shaped aggregates and water flowing through it. And the central photograph shows well-structured grassland soil, and you can see where those aggregates are allowing the water to flow through, even though it's actually a wet soil. But on the right, you have a poorly managed arable soil, which has capping at the top, and topsoil and subsoil compaction, which are obviously barriers to the movement of water and nutrients, and also the growth of roots. So this brings us back to the role of soil biology and the need for carbon to feed that soil biology. Soil aggregates are in a constant cycle of formation and breakdown, and this picture is from a very recent paper by Danny Ort and colleagues, which shows the life cycle of soil aggregates and how carbon feeds the biology, which stabilises the aggregates, which then go around this cycle. So it's actually this relationship between carbon, soil and the biology which sticks the aggregates together to give us good soil structure that supports healthy crop growth. In fact, we now know that some of the most stable carbon in soil is dead bacteria and fungi, and that's protected because where the bacteria and fungi live next to these soil particles become stuck inside aggregates that are actually made by the fungi and bacteria themselves. So it's actually the soil biology that controls the access to the carbon. It's interesting to consider that if you look at the next picture, which is also from a recent scientific paper, that more of the carbon in agricultural soils comes from bacteria and fungi, proving how important soil biology is for carbon sequestration and the health of farm soils. So just to summarise, increasing carbon in soils has many direct and indirect benefits for farm businesses. There's room for huge amounts of carbon to be restored back to soils. We know that soil management does change soil carbon stocks, and we can measure it, which is obviously echoing what Becky said at the beginning. Carbon provides the energy for soil biology to maintain soil structure and fertility, and so carbon sequestration is important for both slowing down climate change and adapting to its effects on the weather. So thank you for listening and Happy New Year.
Thank you ever so much, Jenny. That's brilliant, and it's been a really good introduction, and I can already see that we've got some fantastic questions which hopefully we shall pick up in the discussion. So without further ado, I would now like to move on to Louisa, who joins us from Australia and is going to explain some of the work that she's been doing over there around carbon trading. Thanks very much, Louisa.
Good morning, everyone, and I hope that you can see my presentation now. I'm sure somebody will let me know if there are any issues. Again, I would like to thank the organisers for this truly international event, and I have to say I am really excited about what's going on. We are working internationally as well. Now, I've only got 10 minutes, which is really a very short amount of time to try and fit some of this information in. So in Australia, so I'm going to jump straight in and let's see how we go. So as Beck said, we did start this in around 2006. All of those questions that Beck's now asking, all of that research, all of those things were lacking in Australia as well. But we went to, these are the things that we did in order to...
Really quick.
Can you see?
The slides,
Yeah.
when you went to full screen, it went black on our side.
So what would you like me to do?
So you're seeing your slides kind of go through.
Yes.
Go through. Okay. Go out of present mode and go back in and see if that does it.
Okay. So view slideshow.
Yeah. Now view slideshow.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, it's black again.
Any good?
No.
Okay. Beck does have my slides as well.
If you go back to slideshow.
Yeah.
Then,
do you want me just to do it from there? I'm happy to do it from there.
Do it from there. Thanks.
Okay. All good. Okay. So I was just letting you know, it's a journey that we've been on as well. The things that we've done are very similar to get. So we came from a marketing background. and which is how come we decide that we're the place where the market meets everything, all those exciting things that are happening in both the science and the practice that Beck and those guys are doing. So it is incredibly exciting. And just to let all the farmers know, this is international. It doesn't matter where you are. We're working in Nepal at the moment. We're doing agroforestry in Nepal on moringa trees now, and under the gold standard. So there are ways in which the UK can get into a market straight away. We didn't wait for policy. We assisted policy to get going. We did all those things on that previous slide in order to expand the knowledge, very similar to what I've just heard in the UK. So in our view, the farmers are the VIPs, the very important people of climate change mitigation. Never forget that. The world needs farmers in order to feed the world as well as mitigate against climate change. Lose the soil and we'll lose everything. So our farm of the future looks like this, where farmers can be paid not just for their normal things. So in Australia, you might be a farmer of wheat and sheep, for instance. However, now with the carbon markets, you've got the ability to earn money from various different things. Agroforestry, trees in agriculture, the moringa tree in Nepal is what we're doing with that. Biodiversity credits. Now that is something that Jenny mentioned about the co-benefits. The biodiversity, we can increase biodiversity on farm by better soils, better shade and shelter, all of those things. These are now being valued, and they can be valued as well as a carbon credit. Carbon offset credits, that's a straight credit for CO2 sequestered in soil or trees. We deal only in the farming sector. There are other sectors that can also earn carbon credits. Water credits, but farmers in Australia are being paid to improve the water that is running off from their farms by improved nitrogen management, because these farms go straight into the barrier reef, the Great Barrier Reef, which is one of our best assets, and renewable energy on farm as well. So think of your farm now as a biodiverse carbon resource, and most of them have got a market. Just very quickly, I'll move through this. This was how we started. We were on 1,700 acres in the central west of New South Wales, and we came into the worst drought. The drought before the drought that we've just had. This is 2006, 2007. And it was a very bad drought. And then, so what happens in droughts in Australia is that they get, it comes out of drought with enormous rainfall. And you've seen this in Australia again in this current drought. So we were in drought and we were crutching our sheep. That's our sheep in the background, and that's the shearer there. But we got 75 mils in 35 minutes, which is gigantic for where we live. At the time, we were in John Howard's era, and that's our son, and he was managing. And so having a bit of fun, we were being told to adapt to climate change. And so he went down and got his kayak and he adapted to climate change and he enjoyed the ride. But what you can see there is really bad hydrology. And so our water was just rushing off our country because of the drought and because of the dry. These sheep should never have been shorn in weather like that. But what we had done is we had put our sheep into what we called sacrifice paddocks. These are now becoming more and more popular, whereby you feedlot your sheep or cattle in the dry and save your best country. So we had fed our sheep in those sacrifice paddocks, and we had saved that country, which is the river flats and the more fertile country. So when it did rain, we were able to get a response straight away. And this is more biomass above and below ground, and this came to be termed carbon farming. So just because of our management, this is the direct opposite farm to us, straight opposite us. And so we had saved our country and we had managed it for carbon, and the people opposite us hadn't. And so that is where we became convinced that change management can do these things. And then we lobbied. for this, for the policy, not just us, but many others. We went to America. We found out exactly what Jenny is saying about soil carbon, what it can do for global warming. And for us, it was natural that then there should be a market for those services. Farmers are providing those services and they should be paid. So the implications always were and still remain that we're a major emitter, especially methane in cattle in Australia or any country that has, you know, large numbers of cattle. However, we're the major sink. The soil is the largest carbon sink over which we have control in the world. Yes, the ocean is different, and yes, with sequestration in the ocean is starting to be explored with seaweed and those things as well. Great, fantastic. But if we're to feed the rest of the world, we need to address climate change. We can address climate change and feeding the world in one go. That was the win-win-win that got us so excited in the beginning. And it still remains the only natural process for taking the legacy load from the air and sequestering it safely back into the soils and into vegetation. So nitty-gritty. So in Australia, we have over $1 billion in our domestic carbon markets at the moment, and that was from lobbying from around the 2006-2007. Here we are in 2020, and we're a major industry, so it doesn't take that long, and much faster now. And there are international methods that anyone listening to this today can take part in. So it operates through the use of tradable certificates, and I'm happy to share my slides. More information is on my Carbon Farmers of Australia site. I'm always up for a discussion either by Zoom or phone or any of those, because there's a lot to learn between those on-farm research and getting it to the trade. In Australia, we call them Australian Carbon Credit Units, or ACCUs. Everyone in the world who trades in soil carbon will trade in CO2e. And one credit equals a tonne of CO2e. And CO2e is equal to the tonne of carbon times 3.67 to 2 decimal points, which means that in Australia, for every 1 tonne of carbon that I can store in my soils or in trees, in forest regrowth, environmental plantings, different farm-based things, I can then trade 3.6 tonnes of CO2, which is a really good multiplier for farmers. You store carbon and you trade carbon dioxide. And methane is reduced to CO2 for trading as well. And this currency is worldwide, which enables me to trade internationally, although there are complications with that. So we have an industry worth 1.2 billion Australian dollars. And we were being shown by Jenny the potential price increase of carbon. I really like that graph. You know, I'd take 20 quid for a tonne of CO2e right now. It's currently around $16 or $17 Australian for a tonne of CO2, stored in the soil or in vegetation or in other things as well. We have a reverse auction. So our government has put in $2 billion to support this trade, the current government. And there is only around $150 million left. So it has been taken up mostly in agricultural side of things, mostly in forest regrowth. However, the soil carbon is really important as well. We're administered by a clean energy regulator, and our methods are LAW law. So the Carbon Farming Initiative is our legislation and it's law. Every single project that puts in has to follow a method, and the method gives you every single thing you must do. How do I measure that soil? How deep can I get? What am I allowed to do on that land to earn a carbon credit? Some things are excluded. For instance, under our system, you cannot just apply biochar to soil and get a credit. They're nuances. They are nuances within methods. International methods run by VERA, VERRA, can now also be done for soil carbon. So the UK, anywhere, Nepal, anywhere, can put in carbon farming projects under different standards, gold standard, Vera, different standards right now. We're doing that research as well this year to see how else we can assist international. So we've been here since 2014 in terms of the ability to earn a credit from the soil, but it is one of the more difficult ones for all of those reasons that Jenny and Becky have outlined. You know, we had to get the measurement right. The method has got various discounts in it which don't favour farmers. So we are still on the road to making it a highly interesting method for farmers. It was good when Jenny said it, you know, your equilibrium can come in around 30 years. That's fantastic because you can have a project in Australia for 25 years and be paid income for your soil carbon increases while they're increasing up to 25 years. So, and the co-benefits we've already had pointed out, and what I'd like to say is that the co-benefits are now being valued as well. And these can be done under STGs and different ways of measuring. So for my farmers, this is what they have to consider when they're thinking about putting a project in. And I'm sure somebody will tell me if I'm running over time as well, Beck. Just let me know how I'm going. So you have to look at the price per tonne, how many tonnes per hectare you believe you can do, and the hectares enrolled. And then you have to compare that to how much is that land management change going to cost. In Australia, the soil testing is one of the most expensive things still. And that's because, yes, we are digging holes. We won't have to dig holes forever. There'll be sensors and lots of other different things. We measure down to 1 metre so that we're getting those dead microbes right down to that level, and we can be rewarded right down to that level. The cost of baselining, that's monitoring. Because you're selling CO2, the monitoring and the record keeping, all of those are quite rigorous because you're selling air and you have to prove to a buyer that you have sequestered that carbon. So don't be afraid of the fact that the rigor around how you have to monitor is quite high because of what we're selling. Aggregation insurances, your contract and your permanence liability, which is here we can have a 25-year project or we can have a 100-year project. And there's different liabilities around that. This just gives you very quickly the things that a farmer can do in Australia to earn a credit. We can store carbon in the soil. We can plant seeds or seedlings to establish a permanent forest. We can establish a plantation or farm forestry, or we can let degraded land revert to native forest. No planting, you just change your management such that the forest will regrow and you can be paid for the carbon in the regrowth. And you can protect or maintain the existing forest under some more rigorous rules. Just very quickly, this is the way that the market can look both here in Australia and internationally, because I'm aware, of course, you know, we are working in Nepal, very much smaller farmers. However, I do know that farmers organise themselves in co-ops over there. And so what you can do is a number of farmers can be put together, and that makes a more viable level of a project. So if you've only got 0.2 of a hectare or 1 hectare, but you can get together with 250 farmers under a good governance structure, then that can be aggregated. And then you've got an amount. Obviously, you have to work out the governance between all of those things. Up here this represents all of the paperwork, all of the monitoring, all of the records that have to be kept. What did you put on? When did you put it on? You know, are you following the rules? All of those things. And this is whatever standard you might be going under. That could be gold standard. It could be the Australian standard. So we can't just directly pick up our method and bring it to the UK. However, there are as I said, there are already other standards that are internationally based under which you can do that. So do not think that there is any reason not to move forward to a market. There is no reason. Their auditing is very high because, yes, the auditor comes out and this is in all of the standards, and he or she must be sure that you've done all of these things. And then you get, you pass the audit and you get your, in Australia, this would be ACCUs, Australian Carbon Credit Units. In other standards, they are called different things. A buffer pool, there is always what's called a risk of reversal pool, which means that in our case, the government keeps back 5%. So if your auditor has said, yes, you may claim, 1,000 credits in this particular time frame, then the government will keep back 5% of that, and you will only be credited for 95% of it. And that varies with different standards as well. You can also then, so then you're going to market, and this aggregate could go to a retail or a farm gate. You know that in Australia there's a lot of farmers selling direct to consumers via websites, and you could add your carbon credit to that offering. However, there are also brokers and exchanges that are normal, because in Australia it's like a share. I have to hold what's called an Australian Financial Services Licence in order to be able to assist farmers to trade, because it's a financial instrument here in Australia. And then we can sell. So we've got various different ways of selling, not just to the government. And a very quick look at, and I'm nearly finished, a very quick look at so this is the government, this is what the government has bought using their $2 billion and where it has gone. So you can see at the very top here, the most has gone to vegetation, as I was just saying, because it's easier than the soil. The soil is, it's variable. All the things Jenny said, it cycles, all of those things. You've got to get it to the point where the trend is moving up. So the vegetation has been the highest one, which is storing it back in trees, either by planting or by, saving the forest. Landfill and waste is, when you put it into all the rubbish into landfill, and instead of releasing the gas as methane, from that you change it from methane to CO2, and you can get a credit for that. We don't deal in that. And then the next one is agriculture, and that is where the soil is. So you can see it's quite important in our trade, and then it goes down from there a little bit. I don't have time to explain all of those. So they have $192 million in a portfolio, 473 projects under contract, and the average. So these are the prices that were the average weighted price at each auction. There's been 9 of them, and the average across the portfolio is $12. However, that's a bit misleading, because, as I said, I could get $16 in what's called the secondary market at the moment. So what we do is we are a one-stop shop for a farmer to go from his farm through to trading an Australian carbon credit unit. So we can assist in choosing the method, having a look at your whole farm, as Beck said. We call that a whole farm carbon audit. However, we advocate taking your emissions reductions and your sequestration to market, not just going carbon neutral, because we're market people. And I've told you that we're doing some agroforestry in Nepal. And with that, I'd like to finish. In Australia, sometimes, we're a bit cash strapped, and so this is what happens in Australia sometimes. We need alcohol research. So I'd like to thank you very much, and I hope I haven't gone too much over time.
Move swiftly on to Tim, because I know that did run slightly
Beck,
over.
can you yeah, right. Okay. All good?
Yep. So we're going to move. Yep. Perfect. Thank you. I think it's a really complicated topic. I love the bit where you said farmers are the VIPs. But at that point, I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to hand over to Tim. He's going to explain to us some of the work that he's been doing at Yo Valley. But there'll be lots of opportunities to pick up some of the points in questions, hopefully.
Thank you.
So Tim, over to you.
Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon from wherever you are. I'm Tim Mead from Yeo Valley. I'm a farmer and yogurt maker. Can we have the slide presentation, please, Josh? There we go. This is a view of our valley in Somerset. In the west of England, where we come from, my family are descended from 500 years of farmers, and we now all live within 10 miles of the Yeo Valley. The word Somerset describes the land of the summer people. It is where, for hundreds of years, farmers would take their cattle and livestock to graze on the rich summer grasses. I was even named after a grass, Timothy. Thanks, Dad. So, next slide. As yogurt makers, learning about different strains of bacteria is part of our inner being. We even use yogurt bacteria to help make the silage to preserve the winter feed for our cows. Applying this fascination of bacteria to soil, for me, has just been a natural progression. There are so many small changes that we have made on our farms to how we can look after our soils, and they all add up to a significant difference. I guess this is the theory of marginal gains, which the management theory of marginal gains was the art of British cycling team, where they came up with 100 different things that would just add 0.0 of a second. And the result of that is that we managed to win a whole load of gold medals in 2012. Next slide. Right, so what are we learning? And that's the title of this presentation. What have we learned about our soils? In 2009, we did a whole load of sampling, and Becky at the FCT was at the very, very heart of that. And we sampled over 1,000 soil samples on 2,000 acres at 3 different depths. And we'll repeat all of that in 5 years' time. And what we learned from that is that the 2,365 tons of CO2 from our annual carbon footprint from producing 2.7 million litres of organic milk, finishing 100 beef cattle and finishing 600 lambs, what we did is, when compared to the results of the soil samples that we'd taken in 2015, the results showed that we'd been carbon positive, which for us as farmers is brilliant. So as farmers, we will concentrate on soil, let other people focus on climate change initiatives that we can't do. We see soil as central to our mission. It's below our feet. We stand on it. We will fall by our ability to look after the soil that we farm. We're not just farmers, however. We have a brand. Next slide. Here's a range of our products. In simple terms, what having a brand means is that we have to start and maintain conversations with people who are and could buy our products. Soil is going to be a tricky conversation. As organic farmers, we've been trying for the last 25 years to talk about soil and the benefits of that brings to the products that we produce. The difference to the last 25 years to what is now happening, and which I think is evident by the conversations that have been going on, is that the story around carbon and soil storage that is emerging is a really exciting opportunity for us to talk about things. Next slide. Consumers. We're all consumers, and our perspectives are really hard to challenge. It takes 1.5 seconds of our brain time to choose what milk we're going to buy at the supermarket fixture. There are today, especially with social media, we are being bombarded with messages from all different areas. And to remain sane, to remain rational, to remain human, we are learning to shut out all of these messages. The message that we cannot allow to be shut out, is the one about carbon and the ability of soil to store it. Next slide. This is made all the more harder because 95% of our purchasing decisions are in our psyche, they're in our subconscious. And therefore, how do we give ourselves a chance of communicating the benefits that we all believe are there from soil to our consumers? Next slide. These images, wind, solar, electric cars, they're all very visual. They all stir natural emotions. Instantly, you look at those and you feel, you feel emotions like clean. You feel good. You feel that you're making a difference. It is a very emotional, visual image. Next slide. The trouble with this image is, does one field look very much like another? Where is the magic? Where's the emotion? Where is it that, the magic is? It's below our feet. It's sort of out of sight. It's out of mind. And therefore, it's going to be really difficult to communicate this to consumers. Next slide. Marketing is a fascinating area. It's sort of a bit where we've heard a lot of the science tonight about soil and carbon, but marketing is where, it's that fusion. It's where science meets art. We get persuaded by visual images and emotion. And so marketing is fascinating. If you want, this is a slide that, from Seth Godin, whereby if you want people to talk about you, if you want people to remark about what you're doing, you have to be remarkable. You can't be average. You can't be boring. You have to be, the thing that gets through the emotion in the human brain that people recognize and respond to. Next slide. This is the entertainment value tonight. I'm not sure what you've missed on TV or breakfast TV, depending on what part of the world. But these are a couple of adverts that we made over 10 years ago that in their time, they were decided and people said that they were remarkable. And now Josh, hopefully, is going to play them both. Not all of them, but if you can sit back and sip on whatever you're drinking, please enjoy these two adverts.
Yeah, we make this look easy, cause we're proper modern with this farming, believe me. Wind turbines are shining, baby. In solar farming, no buts, no maybes. And yeah, we're down with the Soil Association, and we do lots of what? Conservation, sustain, maintain, it ain't a thing. We set the bar, real leaders by far. Yo Valley, Yo Valley.
There's no harm in our pure and natural farming. We are as one with the countryside. Your valley naturally, we won't change, no never. We'll farm this way forever and ever.
Thanks, Josh, for the adverts. That was brilliant. Can we have the next slide now? Right, so getting back to marketing, game changers. In our 25 years as a brand that has been trying to, we have 100 organic farmers across the UK supplying milk into our business. And to date, we've been concentrating on the brilliant basics and the compelling differences. This is, marketing textbook stuff. And the question for us is now have we got a game changer in soil sequestration? Is it something that is going to make a difference and allow us to go beyond brilliant basics and compelling differences? Next slide. So, producing healthy, nutritious, delicious food while helping to reverse climate change. Is that a game changer? I don't know. If it is a game changer, what is our purple cow? What is the thing that is going to make us stand out, that to get through the mind of humans out there to say this is something that is going to make a difference? And the answer to the purple cow is, next slide. Now, here we go. Welcome to the regeneration generation. Goodbye the baby boomers, goodbye the millennials, Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen Z again, the regen gen. It needs to include everybody. If we're going to make a difference, we have to have consumers who recognize the ability to make choices on food that will really make a difference. So going back to the central point of the topic is, what have we at Holt Farms and Yeo Valley learned about soil and its ability to sequester carbon? Well, the answer to that is, it's a massive opportunity for farmers to be part of a solution to help reverse climate change. The caveat to that is we need to create demand from consumers for food produced using organic regenerative farming methods. Soil is a remarkable story. We need to tell it in a remarkable way so that we take people with us. If anybody is in the west of England now, in the summer, we have a festival called Yeo Valley Valley Fest. It happens at the beginning of August. It's music, food, farming, and a good meeting point to talk about regenerative organic farming. If you're around and available, please come and join us. And many thanks for watching and listening to the presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Tim. And I think that really rounds off nicely, what we've been talking about. And I think it's really interesting to hear about the importance of marketing and how we start to tell that story to our consumers and some of the opportunities that are there. So apologies, I've done a really rubbish job of chairing this session in terms of keeping everybody to time, but I think that probably starts to highlight the complexity and the depth of this subject and some of the topics that have been spoken about this evening. So I think we've probably got time for one question. Oh no, hang on. Are we going over to the Zoom session, or have we got time for one question? Oh, I think we have. Perfect. So if I could ask our panelists just to keep their answers brief. There is a Zoom link, so we will be moving over to a Zoom session. But I'm just going to ask you one very quick question, which is what your thoughts are on soil carbon metrics being a driver for corporate land buy-ups and banking and skewed manipulation of offset trading. I don't know whether Louisa wants to start us off with any experiences you might have, and then if either Tim or Jenny wants to comment on that, and then as I say, I'm happy for the organisers to tell me when I need to be quiet and we move over to the other link.
Wow, that's a doozy. That one's a doozy. Beck, can you just repeat it again, please?
Sorry,
so I can get it in my head?
Yes. What are your thoughts on soil carbon metrics being a driver for corporate land buy-ups and banking and skewed manipulation of offset trading?
Okay, look, I don't know about it being skewed, in the offset trading. Soil carbon as a KPI for land values, I think it will come. Because I don't see any other way that we're going to be able to feed 7 billion now and others in the future. They're just not aware of it at the moment. However, I can let you know that in Australia, under the method whereby you regrow forest, and we saw that it's the most used method in Australia because the abatement calculations are the best, the land in those districts has skyrocketed in price. And I get, requests all the time. Should I buy this farm? Should I buy that farm? And I say, well, if you're in that district and it hasn't got a project on it, then there's probably two reasons. One, the big guys here, the big developers haven't come to you, therefore it's rubbish. Or two, the landholder didn't want to do it. So it certainly has changed the way land values in the tree space. So I see no reason why CO2 as a soil carbon might do the same.
That's perfect. Thank you. Jenny or Tim, do you want to comment on that one at all, or not? It's completely up to you.
Jenny, do you want to go?
I'm just not really in that space, and I think this is
Yeah.
You know, something that I would say personally is something that I do wonder about when you hear about farmers signing up for very long-term contracts to, you know, maintain soil carbon stocks, which can't be changed, because that then to me means that somebody else is controlling the use of your land. You see what I mean? But this is something that maybe, because I don't work in that space, but to me that seems like something I wouldn't want to enter into a contract like that as a farmer myself. But I assume, Louisa, that contracts, you know, have to have some flexibility in it, because, you know, you can't keep a land use in a particular land, you know, in a particular space for 100 years or whatever. So that's my personal opinion, which is very uninformed.
No. I think that's great, and I think there'll be opportunities to have that discussion. I don't know either Fran or Josh whether I can continue.
Say something on that one, Becky.
Yeah,
I mean,
go for it.
I think land in different countries and different continents is owned in different ways. So in the UK, it is quite rare to find huge tracts of land owned by corporations and bankers. You know, so lots of farmers, you know, own their farm, but they owe money to the bank. But in the UK, you know, it would, you know, I think having large corporations, bankers, corporate money owning huge tracts of the world or huge tracts of the UK would be a massive backward step, because their investment in looking after that land, you know, the myriad of farmers in the, you know, so the average farm size in the UK is not massive. It's not a corporate business. You know, it is a family farm, and people care about what they're producing and how they're looking after the land. And I just think, you know, if there is going to be a massive opportunity for making money out of carbon, okay, in soil carbon sequestration, to keep the bankers and the corporates at bay and allow that income to flow through to the reduction of the cost of the food. So farmers are going to make money out of carbon by farming in a certain way. If that allows the good food that they're producing to be able to be accessible to the population of the country wherever they are at, okay, that is far more beneficial and desirable than having the venture capitalists steam in because they think they're going to make a load of money. And I would be against that and everything we could possibly do. So.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Another question that's come in, and again, Jenny, I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on this. And I know, Louisa, that you said that currently under your conditions, biochar is an interesting one. So Jenny, I don't know, do you have any data, or have you sort of seen any of the literature on the use of biochar and its potential? I know here in the UK, it's obviously mentioned as one of the potential technologies in our NFU net zero aspirations by 2040. Have you had any experiences of applications of biochar?
I know that there's been a huge amount of interest in it, and it's used in varying degrees around the world. I would say that in the amount of biochar that you would have to add to, you know, a reasonable soil would be so great to make a measurable difference that you know it would be an unsustainable option. You have to think back another step to where the biochar is coming from. What's the you know, the organic matter that's been pyrolyzed to make the biochar that you're then applying to your soil. So, you know, if you think that dry matter is, you know, so much percentage of, you know, some organic matter, you'd have to pyrolyze a hell of a lot of, you know, quite functionally okay organic matter to get to a point where, you know, you had something for it to put on your soil. I think there's an exception where if you had something that was affected by pathogens or something, you know, that you'd have to treat to get rid of those pathogens, well, that's fair enough, you know, as a waste, something from another waste stream. But I wouldn't grow a plant to then pyrolyze it to produce biochar, because that's just you know, that's not logical.
Beck, if I could just make a very quick comment there, because that is correct. You know, the price of biochar and the amount that you would have to put on has been a big issue here as well. There is a group, and you could look it up, and they're called Soft Agriculture, SOFT Agriculture, And he's put a large amount of money into biochar, but he's also done a large amount of research on feeding activated biochar at low levels to chickens, for instance, to get a productivity increase, and then use the biochar infused litter from underneath these chooks to turn into a compost. And then you've got, biochar infused compost, which decreases the cost of what you're doing. And the other way that he's doing that is also incorporating activated biochar into animal feeds. And so when you do that, there are productivity gains with the animal, and then you're getting biochar back onto the ground in a much more usable way that actually gets around some of our issues in terms of you can't just whack biochar on. But yeah, that is the way that some of those issues have been solved over here.
I still think that growing a plant is the best way to increase soil carbon.
I agree.
Okay, brilliant. One for you, Jenny, looking at some of the sort of biology stuff as well, which has come in, which says, since more soil organic matter, including soil organic carbon, can be built via the decomposition pathway, the microbial carbon pump via exudates, sphealing, necromast, and mycorrhizal fungi mining is a finite tub really that good of an analogy? Is the amount of soil isn't finite, so can we build new soil to hold more carbon? So I suppose it's on that the bathtub analogy. Do we get to a point where actually we can just create new soil?
I think there's nothing's impossible, but I think natural soil creation starts with soil weathering of bedrock, and there's lots of information around about how long it takes to make 1 centimetre of soil, and the reason for that is because that end of things is very slow. So weathering of bedrock to release the minerals that then can become part of soil because they mix with soil organic matter and the biology starts to colonise it or whatever. That's kind of a rate limiting step in new soil formation, if you like. And I think my idea about the bathtub is, it is a big dynamic, pool that is moving and turning over and all the rest of it, and weathering is part of that. But I don't think the option to build new soil is probably something we should be thinking about. It's rejuvenating what we've got already is probably where we put the energy now. Urban wastes, concretes and all the rest of it. We've just published something in the journal that I publish, that I edit, where concrete has been colonised by mycorrhizae, and you can see inorganic carbon increasing. So that we haven't spoken about inorganic carbon, but that's also an option for increasing soil carbon, not just organic carbon. But that's kind of another story. So there are lots of ways to get it at the end, but I think we have what we have, and there's plenty of soils to regenerate without thinking about making new soils or accelerating that process, from my point of view.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Another question that's come in, which has come in for me actually, which is around the fact that there are several soil carbon tools that exist, and are there efforts to consolidate to an industry standards? What are the prospects? And I know, Louisa, you were talking a little bit about some of those international standards that exist, and I know when you and I had conversations a while ago, you said it's there to be used, so we can use it. And I think somebody's also commented within the session about some work that's being done by a coalition here in the UK, looking to see if we can establish a protocol like we have with the Woodland Carbon Code and the Peatland Restoration Code. The section that's missing at the moment is a soil and grassland code, and how we can start to develop that system. But Louisa, how easy is it, do you think, for us to start to use some of those international standards currently, or do you think we need to look at their applicability to us here?
Yeah. Okay, so and I did see Matthew from Sustainable Alliance in that chat, and so I'm very happy to chat with him as well. The issue about making your own protocol is that it's a long distance. But you have to let's call it Vera or Gold Standard, which are the two main voluntary ones that are international. And our work is mirroring a little bit what Matthew is talking about. But if you've got your own protocol, it's a long journey to putting the application in, getting it all, reviewed, all of those things, much longer than seeing. And Vera has got this more recent one, the one that came out only just before Christmas. And it's it is definitely the soil carbon. And what they're starting to do in protocols now is more useful because they're giving you alternatives as to how you might measure, for instance, within Vera. Could I, the questions we're now asking is, could we take our measurement system and plug it into the Vera, method, and then better than trying to do the whole protocol yourself. So to see where the gaps are in existing protocols, it, to me, is a shorter pathway, and then identifying one of your projects, one of your farms, and getting a project going. Do show by doing, and do it in the fashion that will, if you're successful, lead to a credit under that, and then lean on those people to assist you. Now, I'm not going to be backward in coming forward and saying that we've found that gold standard is difficult. It is a difficult standard. I don't think they're well enough resourced, and so we've had difficulty, but we're still going to get there. This is in Nepal under agroforestry, and we've planted well over 100,000 moringa seedlings in order for the farmers to be able to use the leaves and the seeds and be paid for the carbon in the tree under the gold standard. So it's a steep learning curve no matter which pathway you go. So get started on the pathway. But the one where you do your own protocol, to us, what we've discovered so far is that's a longer pathway.
Becky, I'm going to interject really quick and just say,
Yep.
Let's be here for a few more minutes, and then at which point we can follow on to our follow-on Zoom session, okay?
That's really kind, thank you. I'm going to ask Tim one real quick question, and then I'm going to conclude it, which is just around: are your carbon footprint figures something that you're going to be publishing for people to see? And in terms of what you did to increase your soil organic carbon, whether you had any plans to go public with it, with the work that we've been doing.
Becky, absolutely. We'll be publishing on the Yo Valley website all of the work that we've done with you guys. I've still got to get the head around all of it about, the carbon at this level, then that level, then the further on down stuff. We've combined the work we've done with the FCT with a full biodiversity report with the Somerset Wildlife Trust across the 2,000 acres. And hopefully we'll be able to come up with a really meaningful management plan that, so we have 385,000 tons of carbon on the 2,000 acres we farm. Now, does that mean anything to anybody? Well, to me, it's nearly 4 times the footprint of the products we produce every year. So, what is 380,000 tons of carbon, and can that be 500,000? Can it be 750,000? I don't know. And that's the work we're going to be doing with you guys so that we can set ourselves a target, because if we can produce food whilst reversing climate change, then what's not to love about that? That's just brilliant. And I don't know, if we can, we're going to give it our absolute all to do that. So we're more than happy to put all the information on our website. We've got all the, the information that you've given us in terms of, the 1,000 samples at the 3 different depths. For anybody who wants to, FCT, there's worm counts, there's all sorts of information on all the different soils. And I just think it's up to us to share it with everybody. People are going to help reverse climate change in many ways. But as farmers, we stand on the soil that we farm. We don't have to look any further. If we do the best we can, then other people can do the other stuff. And, that's quite a simplistic way, but that's how we look at it.
I think that's perfect. And I think at that point, Yeah, I was to say, I think you've almost done our summing up job for me. But I would just like to say at this point, I think we're gonna move over. If anybody has more questions, I know there's a lot more questions. We are going to move over to the Zoom link. Apologies for the technical issues at the beginning, but I think that's a brilliant point to finish it on. And I think I'd just like to echo 2 points. One that Louisa made in terms of, showing by doing. And I think that just echoes what Tim was saying in terms of it is complicated. Jenny and other fantastic scientists are doing their best to try and see how we can start to make it easy to understand. But just because it's complicated, just because it's a bit scary, doesn't mean that we don't start. And that starts by doing something. So hopefully, as I say, you've had a bit more information. As I say, if you do want to follow us over to carry on the conversations, you'd be very welcome. But if you've had enough soil carbon for the evening, then as I say, it's been really nice. Thank you so much for joining. And as I say, thank you so much to our fantastic speakers. They've done an absolutely brilliant job this evening.
Thank you very much, Becky.
Okay, thank you. Right. So you guys happy to go over to the Zoom link?
Half an hour, yeah?
Yeah, that's okay. Brilliant. Right, we shall go over onto the